All right, so I'm going to be teaching you about contrast today. So let's get started. So contrast is the amount of difference between two things. You have probably heard the word contrast in language arts when you compare and contrast, right? For in a story, for example. For photography, we're looking at two specific areas where we're going to compare and contrast. So contrast we use to describe the amount of difference between either the lights and the darks in a photo, like the lighting, so between the darkest spot in the photo and the brightest spot in the photo. And we also can use contrast to talk about the amount of difference between the colors. So here we go. Let's take a look at some examples first with color contrast. So you may or may not be aware that there's a thing called the color wheel. It's a way of arranging the colors in a very specific pattern to help us identify different characteristics of the colors and how they interact with each other. So they're always arranged in this order: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And the reason we arrange them this way is because it helps us identify things like what we call complementary colors and analogous colors. Analogous colors are colors that are side by side on the color wheel. So purple, pink, and red would be analogous colors, but so are blue and green, okay, or red, orange, yellow. Complementary colors are opposite colors on the color wheel. So for example, sort of blue, purple are opposite of yellow. Well, purple is the opposite of yellow, and then more blue colors are the opposite of like orange or gold. Green is usually the opposite of red. In this case, because they're distinguishing differences between red and pink, different shades of green are going to be opposite of different shades of red. So the more purpley the red is, the more it's going to be towards the yellow shades of green. The more red the colors are, the pinks, like the more pinkish red, then it's the opposite of green, okay? So if we take a look at this image, we're going to take a look at which parts, what kind of color combos we have here. So, sorry, I needed a prop. So if we only look at the bottom part of the photo, we have what colors? We have blue and green, right? And if we only look at the top, we have red, orange, and yellow and purple, right? So do we have analogous or do we have complementary colors? We actually have some of both, okay? So we've got orange against blue, which is an opposite. But if you're only looking at the bottom, blue and green are analogous colors, right? But basically the lower half of the photo is all the colors that are opposite of the colors that are in the top half of the photo. Okay, here we've got complementary colors of red and green. Okay, and then here we've got some analogous colors. So we've got yellow, orange, and brown. Here's another one with red, orange, and brown. Okay, analogous colors with greens and blues. Okay, another way to create contrast besides just using opposite colors is to use like where everything is all the same color and you have one pop of color to draw interest. So basically what's going on with contrast using color, if you're trying to create contrast, meaning create a lot of difference, you're going to want to use complementary colors, okay? The reason this is because when you have opposite colors, they fight for your attention, and so it creates more interest or it creates more drama, okay? Basically, there are two different colors are fighting for your attention, and so as you look at the image, your eye is drawn back and forth between different areas of the photo. If you want to have the colors be more cohesive and work together, that's when you would use analogous colors. It doesn't mean nothing pops out or nothing is interesting, but the colors aren't fighting each other for attention, okay? Okay, so the next type of contrast is with light and dark. this out of the way. Okay. So, when a photo doesn't have enough lighting contrast, it looks dull and washed out. You want to make sure that your photo has a nice, what we call range of values. Values meaning like levels of light and dark, okay? So, right, if you were to imagine like a scale, like a number line sort of, but with amounts of black versus white, right? You'd have the blackest black on one side, and so it'd start out with black, and then we get like dark gray, middle gray, light gray, grayish white, you know, slightly off of white, and then bright white. So in a photo, you want to have a little bit of all of those different tones, those values. So the brightest area in this photo is this window, like these window panes, okay? They're bright white, like, and there's some highlights on the windows themselves, on the glass. And the darkest areas, you've got some shadows at the bottom of the wall, and also the windows themselves are very dark. This helps create lighting contrast, makes things feel more vibrant, okay? Here's another example. Another reason that you want to have a good range of values to have enough contrast in a photo with the lighting is that if you don't have enough contrast, your photo can look washed out. So it could look dull or washed out. In this case, what happens is when it's washed out, you lack detail. So in this half of the photo, you can like see more details, especially in the sky. In this half, the sky has lost all detail. You can barely see that there are any clouds, okay? So you want to have a good amount or your photo won't have as much interesting information. That doesn't mean low contrast doesn't have a place in your artwork. Basically, when you have low contrast, it can often create like feelings of softness if used correctly. It can make things feel like cozy, okay? So in this photo, there's low contrast. You can tell because if you try to find the darkest spot in the photo, it's probably this gentleman's hair. It's just dark gray. It's not actually black. And the brightest spot does go to pure white, but because it stops short of getting all the way to black, you just don't have that contrast there. So it makes it feel a little bit more hazy, a little more soft, which works well for taking photos of babies and small children because it adds sort of that cozy feeling. This one, in contrast to that photo, if we're contrasting, okay? The contrast in this photo, right, we have really dark eyelashes that go all the way to black. There's highlights in her eyes that really pop out because those lights and darks are helping create that interest, helping to draw attention. Okay, a couple more examples. Here we've got high contrast. The lightest parts of the photo go to pure white. The darkest parts of the photo are pure black. And then you have a whole range in between. Here's another one with high contrast, right? We have some really bright areas and then some really dark areas. But it's not just in black and white photos. This is important in any type of photo to be paying attention to contrast. As I showed you, high contrast has a place and so does low contrast. But the important part is having an appropriate amount for the type of image you're trying to shoot. So here's high contrast with a color photo. Here's another one. I'll just flip through a couple of examples. Okay, here's some low contrast, but in a color photo, okay? So you can do it on a portrait in either way, but as you can tell, it adds softness, okay? Here's high contrast as another example of like a similar style of image, but with high contrast instead. Okay, so hopefully this helped it make sense. Contrast is the amount of difference between two parts of your photo. You can use it, we use it in photography mostly to describe lighting or colors. All right, good luck with your assignment.